how long you've been in law enforcement for.
Okay. Jerry Davis, I've been with the Sheriff's Office. I started with the Sheriff's Office in 1988
Okay.
as a reserve. I knew I always wanted to be in law enforcement, but I didn't really know how to get started. I would apply places. They'd say, well, we're looking for people with experience. Well, how do you get experience if you won't give me a shot and hire me?
Yeah.
So one of the Abilene police officers, Ira Dewar, I used to ride with him quite a bit on patrol. He talked me into talking to one of the reserve officers and getting on the reserves at the sheriff's office.
Okay.
So I started my career without getting paid, being a volunteer with the reserves in 1988. So I think it was August of 88. The good part about the reserves back then was you had to be serious about it. So you had to buy your own gun, your own uniform, your own leather, your own holster. That's how they weeded out the ones that were just in it for a hobby and those that were really serious about it. So I've got a real soft spot for the reserves. I mean, that's where I got started. And I was in the reserves from August of 88 while I was still working at Great Plains Manufacturing here in Abilene.
Okay.
And I would ride on the weekends with a road deputy, or anytime they needed somebody to work in the jail, I'd volunteer to work in the jail. They needed somebody to work with Brad Hammond in the drug unit. So he let me work with him for a while. I would work with Brad in the drug unit and then go to work at Great Plains during the day. I got a call at the Great Plains Manufacturing one day from Sheriff Carl McDonald. Asked me to come in when I got off work. I came in. He offered me a job. So technically, I didn't even apply for the job. The reserves kind of got my foot in the door. So
Okay. Are the reserves still a thing?
they are not. Over the years, they kind of dissipated. I mean, it was a really huge following back then, but over the years, people kind of faded away from it. And then they had reserves, and then they had part-time officers that they went to the police academy for the 2-week part-time academy. They'd come back and let them work on weekends or to fill shifts. And I had to eliminate that when I took office, which I did. You don't want to, because that's where my bread and butter was. That's where I got started. So, but the liability is just too great in this day and age. I think you've heard of some of the reserves, going to draw for their weapon or taser, and they pull out their weapon and shoot somebody. That muscle memory is not there with the reserves, who only work one every 3 months, one shift every 2, 3, 4 months. So I really couldn't keep the reserve program going.
Gotcha.
However, some of the reserves still meet every week, every Wednesday, down at Joe Snuffy's for breakfast. So when I'm available, I go back and touch base and have breakfast with the old cronies. So
Okay.
it was really kind of cool getting back in touch with them all.
So, have you ever had to interrogate someone before, personally?
Hundreds, if not thousands of times.
What's something that you and your personal experience have been key to getting the information that it was that you're looking for? What's a tactic that you think that works fairly well?
Well, my whole thing is honesty. I was able to get more out of people just by being honest with them than trying to lie to them and trick them.
Mm-hmm.
There would be often times where I'd be investigating a serious crime as a criminal investigator, and the first thing they would ask when I'd sit down to interview them is, am I going to go to jail? I would always tell them whether or not they were going to go to jail, and I was honest with them. Yes, you're going to have to go to jail, but I don't have any choice. This is where we're at, and I'm just here to get your side of the story. And they, believe it or not, the majority of people still wanted to talk with me.
Yeah.
So
you think it's key to just keep the relationship honest and
oh yeah,
just really try to be human and not
be honest, but there's a way to get people to believe something without lying to them.
Yeah.
For example, I might be interviewing somebody on a theft case. Somebody stole a wallet out of a truck. And I would say, okay, how would you explain your fingerprints on the outside of that truck? An innocent person who's never touched the truck is going to just say, don't worry about it. But the person who was involved has got to think about it for a little while, and then they're going to have to try to explain why their fingerprints are there, or why they'd be on video. So it kind of makes them believe that I know something that I don't. I use that tactic quite a bit when it wasn't lying to them. It was just using their own mind against them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, People who had no involvement in something think totally different than somebody who had some involvement in something. So
It's understandable. What originally drew you to law enforcement?
I don't know. When I was a kid, we used to play cops and robbers in the neighborhood, and I always wanted to be the cop. And then I'd watch TV. One of my favorite programs growing up was Adam 12. I don't know if you've ever heard about that.
Mm-mm.
It's about a rookie cop and a veteran cop in LA, just the day-to-day calls that they would have. I watched that religiously. Then I watched Emergency, which is about the fire and paramedic. It was just something that drew it to me, and I knew I wanted to do it. I just didn't know how to get into it. That's where Officer Dewar really planted the seed and got me going. So,
Gotcha. Was there someone that you like looked up towards in law enforcement that kind of drew you to it, like personally in your own like childhood experience, or?
childhood experience. Well, when I was growing up, um, two of my better friends were Terry Payne and Monty Payne, and their dad was a police officer, Jerry Payne, for years. And as a matter of fact, their mom used to babysit me, so I was kind of around it, and I got to see that. And then we'd go to Manhattan for family gatherings, and my cousin was a police officer with the Riley County Police Department, the Manhattan Police Department back then, I guess, before it became Riley County. So being around it really was interesting to me, and I just loved it, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to get started.
Gotcha.
So
What's the differences between law enforcement when you first got in versus now?
technology.
Technology? Just kind of how
Yeah.
you guys go about proceeding
It
things.
was simple back then. We didn't have body cameras. We didn't have dash cameras. So what the sheriff did was he issued us all pocket recorders, so pocket voice recorders, so we could, if I stopped somebody who was a suspected drunk driver, I turned that recording on, and then it was all audio recorded, but there was no video recording. Also, back when I started, there was very few bag phones, and then there were the big brick phones. So we didn't have cell phones back then. So whenever dispatch needed to call us and they didn't want to put it over the radio, they would say public service over the radio. That meant drive to a payphone. And we went to the payphone so often that we knew the number of every payphone throughout the whole county. Like I think the payphone at Kerr McGee gas station back before they tore it down was 9885, 9882.
Hmm.
So I'd just key up the radio and say 806 800, call 9882. And they'd call the payphone and I'd answer. And that's how we communicated back then, was through payphone. So if I'm down by the Harrington Lake and they needed something, I would have to find the nearest payphone, which I think there was ones at Barnes IGA in Harrington, and there was another one in Woodbine. So if they needed me to call in on the phone, I would have to drive to a payphone to call in.
So it's definitely probably a plus having that technology nowadays.
Yes. It's a plus, but it's also a minus.
What's the negative side of it?
Well, everybody has them. And the technology now is different. Everything is so at your fingertips now. For example, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force in Wichita has so many tips and crimes coming in and so many things that they discover on the internet that we entered into a memorandum of understanding with them to aid them in their investigations that involve citizens or witnesses or suspects in Dickinson County. When we did that, I had no idea how many tips we were going to get. So we are in a joint memorandum of understanding with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force in Wichita, and they send us tips on child pornography, people that are exploiting children and such as that. One of my detectives here about a month ago, I've got two investigators, and one of them said that about 85% of his criminal activity has to do with sex cases and sexual exploitation cases.
Why do you think that seems to be on a rise?
I think it's just that it's out there in everybody's face all the time. It's just the accessibility is, there's no filters on it. When I was growing up, you knew that they had nudie mags back then, Playboy and stuff like that. They kept them on the shelves in the quick shop, but they were always on the top shelf behind other magazines where the kids couldn't get them. The adults had to be there. And then they couldn't thumb through them because they were all encased in plastic wrap. So you had to try to get to them back then. You don't have to try anymore. You can just get on the internet and search, and it's right there.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
biggest problem.
I'd say that that's one thing I've definitely seen, even since, me being a child till now, is like even ads on TV or YouTube or whatever I'm watching a show on. I mean, some commercials, it's just like, I don't know how that's even allowed, but it seems like that's definitely with the music, TV. I mean,
It's in your face.
yeah, it's
And
all
I don't know
over.
how you keep your kids away from it.
Yeah, that's something that I even question myself, when I have kids, is like, because obviously the connection with technology I feel like needs to be there because everything's going towards technology nowadays, but how to navigate that I feel like is definitely a huge obstacle with parents nowadays.
Yeah, and the parents need to be educated, and the kids need to be educated. Several years ago, Judge Sexton and I, when I was a criminal investigator, we got together and we teamed up, and at the Abilene Middle School, we would present a program to the middle school students on sexting and phone safety and that type of thing. I think it made a difference back then, but Judge Sexton moved on to the chief judge of the district. I'm now the sheriff, so we don't have the opportunity to present that like we used to. But I think it was effective.
Yeah.
I think we caught a lot of kids' attention with that.
What is about technology with kids you think that draws them to maybe look at those things, or is it because it is kind of like a something that we're told not to, or
It could be because it's that taboo you want to stay away from. I know sometimes I used to explain it to the middle school kids like this. Okay, here's how it would start innocently in the middle school. Let's say you've got a couple of seventh graders who are kind of dating back and forth. Um, the kids go home at night, and the boyfriend says, "Hey, I love you. Why don't you send me some pictures?"
yeah,
Female may not want to, but she loves this boy, so she feels pressured into it. Innocently enough, she may take a picture, sends it to him. What's the first thing he does when he gets to school the next day?
shows friends.
Shows all his friends. What do the friends do? Send me that. And then it's all over.
Yeah,
That's how it starts. And it's something as innocent as that. And nobody expects it to blow up to anything like that. And I just think it's just too easy, and I don't know how to put any guardrails up. I truly don't.
yeah. I feel like, especially with technology and parents, like parents need to be more self-aware as of like what their kids doing. It seems not all parents, but it seems like general society is kind of just like out to lunch. They're caught up with the day to day, go to work, pay bills, and trying to find some type of enjoyment at the end of the day, and not really thinking about like what is it my kid is entertaining on their phone.
I think there's a naivety to there too with the parents. They don't believe that their child would ever become involved in that. They truly don't.
Yeah,
Um, and and I can't blame them for that. I mean, they've grown up with those kids. They know those kids. They think they know them in and out. But it's the pressures outside the family that gets to the kids. I think so.
yeah. Like one day, my wife and I were in a store, and she seen this little plastic glasses in the shape of a wine glass, but had like little kids ring with little toys on it or whatever, and she thought it was kind of cute. And I said it was kind of sad, and she was like, "Well, I don't understand." And I was like, "Well, my personal perception of that is it's getting all something very simple, the shape of a glass, is attracting a kid to the shape of a glass." And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like whether or not that's intentional, that's
It has to
sometimes
be
it is.
intentional. It's like the vape products. I
Yeah,
mean, they're pushing those out. Those are attractive to kids. They've got the flavors that kids like.
yeah,
Um, that's a problem, and I don't know how you stem that tide either. I truly don't.
yeah. That's also one thing that's kind of not exactly confused me, but maybe question about a lot of things is like growing up. We had the Dare program, like
Mm-hmm.
when I was in grade school, like we're taught about like not to be around drugs and everything. And then I think it was around 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, that Colorado legalized marijuana. And then it was kind of like a question, at that age, I was like, well, I thought it was bad. So now, like, is it good? Or like, to me, it's kind of confusing. Not now, obviously, but like looking at things like that, you see things were taught very bad for you. Don't be around it. Don't, tell someone if you are seeing it. And to now, it's like most states are almost either decriminalized it, legalized it, or
Medical
oh,
marijuana, that type of thing.
yeah,
I know one of the narcotics investigators from Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation put on a training for us. And what it did to Oklahoma, and I don't know a lot of the details, but it just blew up down there so big that it's so pervasive that there's illegal immigrants now from China and Cuba and Mexico that are moving into these farming operations in Oklahoma, and they're shipping them out, but they're producing so much product that now they're putting them on pallets, putting them in box trucks or semis, and shipping them to New York or other states. So it's not the marijuana that we grew up with. Uh, I've never tried marijuana, never cared to, but what they're telling me is the potency is so much more potent than what it was years ago when it was ditchweed.
yeah,
That it's more potent, more addictive, more dangerous. We don't do drug abuse and resistance education at the sheriff's office. When I took office in 2021, I wanted kind of a new perspective. I wanted to move on past to something new. So Deputy Brandon Depew found a program called Law Enforcement Against Drugs and Violence. It's a 10-week program on responsibility, respect, drugs, not just illegal drugs, but prescription medications, aspirin, alcohol, other things that kids may be in contact with. But then the last 5 weeks are on bullying. So he's been doing that for the last 3 years, and I don't remember how many students he's graduated, but there have been a ton of them. I think it's a better program. I really love it. I think that the schools like it better. Deputy Depew also is what I call my school liaison officer. He's not a true school resource officer because he's not dedicated to one school. He's got 7 different schools that he goes to throughout the county. But he's the liaison, so if something happens with one of those kids, the school, let's say he's in Solomon doing something at that school, and something happens at the Harrington school, that staff down there knows that they can call him on his cell phone and run it by him. So I've got a liaison in the schools that's working with the kids constantly. He's also my community liaison, which he has scheduled several different civic events. First year I was here, we did the National Night Out in Abilene. We went out to the park. We had hot dogs, chips, drinks. We served everybody. We got a snow cone maker in there, and they gave him $1 snow cones. It went really well, and it was just kind of get out into the community to show the relationship between community and law enforcement. We switched from National Night Out. Now we do Faith in Blue, and we've done that 2 years in a row. It's basically one weekend a year where you have a coordination between local churches and law enforcement who team together, but it's not a religious function. It's more of a community unity function where we come together. So the first year he had a Christian rapper and a Christian singer. We gave away prizes. We had the churches put out different games for different people. We had that here in Abilene. This last year we did it in Harrington at a church. We had a rapper. We're trying to reach the kids. That went over extremely well. We're trying to do it in a different community every year. This year, we're teaming up with the Chapman Police Department. We're going to do it in Chapman this year. Next year, we're hoping to do it in Solomon. He does a lot of that. On June 1st, we're having our first ever fishing with first responders. He's got donated fishing tackle, fishing poles, bait. We're going to provide pizzas to the kids anywhere from 5 to 18 years old. And they're going to go to the Father Padilla Pond there in downtown Harrington, and they're going to fish from, I want to say 9 to 1 or 10 to 1. And then when they're done, we're going to give away a kayak with a life vest and a paddle. Um, Deputy Depew is instrumental in doing a lot of those things for the youth in this county. I can't thank him enough. When there's a trunk or treat program, he's involved. When they have the Easter candy giveaway up at the Dollar Tree Family Dollar, he does that. He roped me into reading Dr. Seuss to the Solomon Elementary School students. Of course, they got to pick the book that I had to read, so they picked the one that had the most tongue tied in it.
Yeah.
And it's not easy reading a Dr. Seuss book when you haven't opened one for 30 years.
Yeah, I bet.
40 years, actually. So he does stuff like that, and it's really great. He has the lead graduation that we go to. This last week we had the lead graduation in Enterprise. We went over and had lunch with the students, and so Deputy Depew is really huge in being there for the kids of this county. So
yeah, I feel like it's definitely an obstacle trying to reach kids nowadays. It's probably more so now than it used to be, being just because of like all the, I can't quite blame it on movies and music and everything, but just how relatively, like you were saying, it's more all the negativity is just in our faces at like all times. It seems like.
No, and I'll tell you what, I've got a great group of guys that really, I've got a lot of young people in my agency, and one of the biggest things I was worried about was you put somebody with a badge and a gun, and all of a sudden they get a big head and they think they're God. I don't have that. I don't see that. I think I've got a great group of guys that actually really care about their community and really want to go out there and do what's right. So I'm very blessed with the crew I've got working with me. I truly am.
Yeah.
So
With the back a couple of years ago, they came. A lot of people were coming out and saying, defund the police. And what is something that you think that people get misunderstood about what exactly that does?
defund the police, I can honestly say that that's something I've never heard around this area.
Yeah.
I think that's promulgated through the larger cities, with which has a more diverse community. And I think there's just so many just angry people. Plus, you have the people that pump them up. Defund the police is a ludicrous theory. I mean,
Yeah.
the police are the one thing between you and anarchy and chaos. So I don't understand that, but I think a lot of it had to do with the demonstrations that were going on, Black Lives Matter, that type of thing. I can't speak for or against any of those topics because I don't live in those communities. I don't know. All I can tell you is here we don't have those issues that I've seen.
Yeah. My personal opinion is I think that law enforcement's probably oftentimes underpaid and underfunded.
They are, but I'll tell you this: I didn't get into law enforcement because of the money.
Yeah.
And it's obvious that the people working now don't get into law enforcement because of the money, because they can be getting better paying jobs anywhere else. Most people who leave law enforcement end up getting a better paying job with less stress. So it's not about that. There's something that drives a true law enforcement professional to do that profession, and it's not money. Now, it's hard to survive when you've got a husband or a wife and two kids, and you've got to pay the utility bills, you got to pay the mortgage, you got to pay for the insurance. I don't know how you would do it on just a law enforcement officer's salary. That's why there's a lot of dual income families. So I know that a lot of people think, okay, well, they're receiving too much pay. You know, that's easy to be on the outside to say, but when you're a detention officer and you've got somebody throwing their urine and their feces on you daily,
Yeah.
and you have to combat that, you couldn't pay the normal person off the streets to do that. It takes a special kind of person to be a detention officer in the Dickinson County Jail or any other facility. And it's not because the people in there that are bad, it's just that you have to deal with so many different types of situations at different hours of every day that you never know what you're going to get into. So I have the utmost respect for our detention facility staff.
If there's someone that's younger and they're looking to eventually graduate school and go into law enforcement, what are some tips to navigate to either get into that or some things that they should think about?
Okay, you can't become a law enforcement officer until you're 21 because you can't carry a firearm until you're 21. 18, you can become a corrections officer. I would recommend that that's a very, very good starting point because that is where you learn to communicate with people. Everybody thinks that it's locking people up in a cell and then you walk down a hallway and you feed them and there's no interaction. That's not how it is. They're pods, and every hour there's a jail check where they have to go into each pod and interact with every inmate in there. All the doors are open in the morning at 6 a.m. and they close at 10 a.m. at 10 p.m. So every hour I've got 2 detention officers that walk in there, hand them out their meds, deal with anything, do jail checks of all the pods and all the cells on every different pod. And that's 24 hours a day. So it's not just locking them up and walking by and looking at them, it's interacting with them. And believe it or not, how well you treat them in jail can affect how they treat you out in the public. I know when I was in the jail, I treated some folks really, really decent. And then when I got on the road, I had some guys up north of Chapman one night that wanted to assault me. And one of the guys there said, "Hey, don't screw with him." When I was in jail, he treated me cool. So kept me from getting my rear end kicked at 2 a.m. north of Chapman one night. So
Yeah, I think karma debt's definitely a thing.
yeah. So I would recommend starting in the jail.
Yeah,
That's huge. We're always looking for that. Now, I'm not over dispatch, but our dispatch center's always looking for decent dispatchers. So that's another way to get your foot in the door. And believe it or not, a lot of people who join dispatch stay in dispatch because they end up liking it. A lot of people who start with corrections like working in corrections or the detention facility, and that's where they want to stay. It used to be years ago, people joined the jail because they wanted to move on out to the road. But I've got a lot of people that just want to work in the detention facility, and they've worked there for years.
what
So
what do you think is something that's often misunderstood about law enforcement officers?
that they don't care, that they're not, that they don't, that they're just robots going through and arresting people and putting people in jail, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Our people, and I think law enforcement in general, truly care about those people that they serve. And it's not about money. It's not about being bragged about. It's just about doing the right thing, and that's what draws people to law enforcement.
Yeah, and I
So
think that like one thing that's misunderstood is say someone's going way over the speed limit, they get pulled over, and the cops coming up, and someone might think that he's being mean or tough on them. And what I think that the normal person doesn't take into consideration is, and the cops probably think, well, why is this person speeding? Why is the person driving the way they're driving? Like, are they intoxicated? Are they
yeah,
just on drugs maybe, or like whatever's going on in their life? You don't know where that person is that's
that's where
driving.
officer discretion is involved. I know when I was on the road, I had stopped a female once that was speeding and had kids screaming in the car. And I could tell there was something wrong because she had a death grip on the steering wheel and was just sitting there staring forward. And I asked her, "Ma'am, if everything's okay." And then she just busted out bawling and said, "No, my husband just deployed. I just dropped him off. I've got to go back home. I'm concerned." This was back during the Iraq War and stuff. They were, she had other issues to deal with rather than a stinking speeding ticket.
Yeah,
So it's officer discretion, and the officer's doing, I think, the majority of the time what they feel is right in that situation. They're not out there to write everybody tickets.
yeah,
So
yeah. If you were president, what would be one thing that you would change or implement that you think that would make the country better?
president, I don't know as president you have that much authority, and I'll tell you why. President is the executive branch of government.
Mm-hmm.
Laws are made by the legislative branch of the government. They're enforced by the executive branch, but they're interpreted by the judicial branch. That's how it was taught to me. As sheriff, I'm part of the executive branch. We enforce the laws. So I don't know that the president has that much power to write laws. Now, of course, he has the power to veto a law or to sign a law into effect. So I think we put too much emphasis on who the president is and not enough emphasis on, if we have every person at the legislature sign off on a bill, how on earth can that president veto it if everybody supports it?
Yeah.
So I think it needs to start at the legislative level.
Is it,
That's my take on things. So
yeah. Is there any time that the job ever kind of conflicts with you, or does you kind of align with what all the job requires?
I don't know what you mean conflicts.
Um, like maybe there's some times where it requires you to do something and it may conflict with how you feel about the situation.
Yeah, I can't see as it's happened to me in the past. Well, it has. There's been times when I didn't want somebody charged with a crime, but the county attorney went ahead and did it anyway. I didn't think it was the best situation for that, or there's been people that I really thought should be charged with a crime, and the county attorney chose not to go forward with it. Um, but I don't think there's anything, you know, that's really stood out to me that's really kind of crossed that line for me.
Yeah.
So
What kind of going back to the whole marijuana thing? To me, it's a little confusing because marijuana is illegal, but then we have like vape shops and everything that has uh, whether it be synthetic or some type of other form of what seems to still be marijuana. To me, that's kind of confusing, and I mean, especially to kids out there, it seems like it's probably intriguing because they probably there's not much known about it. I mean, it all seems relatively new.
it can be confusing. And I'll tell you what, if you had a room full of 50 law enforcement officers, it could be confusing to every different one of those officers as well because it doesn't make sense. They need to clean up the laws and make them so that at least they're understandable. They could only have, it can't have more than 3% THC. And then they had Delta 8. They had other different standards. It wasn't until there was an attorney general opinion put out, I think within the last year or so, and my drug agent knows more about it than I do, that basically says it's unlawful to sell THC products. So then where do you go from there? Because you go shut down a vape shop in Salina, then they can come to Abilene or Junction City or Newton or McPherson and get it. Is that fair to that business in Salina, cracking down on that business when they can go anywhere else and get it? So it's enforced differently between law enforcement agencies as well. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the law enforcement agencies just didn't want to touch it. It was too politically charged, too politically motivated. We need better guidance from the state. We truly do, and it's not there.
Yeah, I feel like to me, just as a regular citizen, to me it's very confusing because it's like, well, is that something that someone can have or is it not? Like, there's just such a big gray area anymore where I feel like it should just be like one or the other.
Exactly. You're spot on that. And the big issue now is, what do you do with the middle school kids because they're hitting vapes
Yeah,
and they get one that's got a marijuana vape cartridge in it. They're not used to it. You may not feel the effects of it the first time you hit it, the first couple times, but after you've hit it half a dozen times, now there's so much there that it can harm you.
yeah,
It's so dangerous, and the state needs to get a handle on it, and I don't know why they haven't. To me, it's pretty simple.
yeah,
Get together, figure it out, and make a law.
yeah, yeah. Especially like, I mean, it's not exactly conflicting to me, but it's like, okay, if you're an adult, I feel like people should be kind of allowed to make that decision, but at the same time, I also understand that adults, like a lot of people's standards, a lot of people's standards are not exactly low, but they don't think about, hey, like, what should my standards be in life? And I think they look at it as like, well, I'm an adult, I can make this choice, and that should be accessible if I want to. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is, going back to the kids, like how many kids' hands are on these things and how easy is it for those kids to get their hands on it.
Yeah,
And I think that's a very big issue.
it's very easy for them to get their hands on it because they can get it from mom and dad's stash. They can get it from a friend. They can get it from a friend of a friend. It's just out there all over the place.
Yeah.
We've got to put our foot down and put an end to it. It's just a matter of how to do it so you're doing it fair.
Yeah.
Again, officer discretion type things. We know we need to do something. And my drug detective and my undersheriff and I have been having this discussion for the last few weeks. What do we need to do? We need to coordinate with the other local law enforcement agencies in the county. We need to coordinate with the Dickinson County attorney to see what he's willing to do, what we need to do, and then with a solid front, present it to the public and say this is our stance on it.
Yeah.
So it's something we're working on. We'll get there. There's no doubt in
What
my mind we'll get there.
Where do you think that it's going with that?
Oh, I think legalization of marijuana is going to come in Kansas.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to it. I believe if we do that, we're going to have a lot of, you're going to have the ones that are licensed shops probably to sell it, but you're going to have a lot of the black market stuck because that's where the cartels become involved. I just think it's going to be a mess. I don't know what to do. I don't know how you solve that and do it right. You got the ones that say, okay, marijuana is illegal, but alcohol is legal. How is that so? Because they're both mind-altering substances.
Yeah.
My only argument to that is if you consume too much alcohol and we stop you, we've got a 0.08 BAC, we can test for that level of alcohol. I don't think they've developed a way to test for the level of THC in somebody's system at the time of a stop.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the quandary of making a law is how do you do that? I don't know, I don't know why there's a difference between alcohol and marijuana, but there is. And
Yeah.
alcohol is acceptable, marijuana is not. For the time being, but it's going to come around.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to be prepared for the results of it.
What does a sheriff's office or law enforcement in general do to try to combat, like you had mentioned cartels, like outside forces coming into, let's say, like our community? Like what is some of the steps that you guys take?
We've got an interdiction team, a drug interdiction team, a human trafficking team, a criminal interdiction team that works primarily on drug cases within the county and on interstate. It's staffed of 4 people. We're short 1 deputy right now, so we've got 3 people in it. But their main goal is to interdict criminal activity. So there was one stop they made on interstate where they intercepted a homicide suspect out of Colorado. So then we have to go to Colorado for court on that case because we caught him and collected evidence. I know just within the last year, a traffic stop interdicted up here on interstate led to a drug trafficking organization from California to Saline County. And as a matter of fact, one of my officers was invited to a banquet at the Salina Police Department, I think earlier this month or late last month. And he was recognized for his efforts in stemming the flow of drugs into Saline County. Now, that was a traffic stop that was initiated here in our county. It involved California and Saline County, but the stuff that's in Salina is coming into Abilene. The stuff that's into Junction is coming into Abilene and Harrington. It truly is. So they're out there daily trying to stem the flow that's coming in. Now, I think we're making a difference because I don't think we have the large ma and pa drug dealers in the county that we used to have. Now, if somebody wants drugs, they might pool their money together and drive to Wichita or Salina or Junction or a bigger city to get it. But it's not like you go to the corner drug guy and you say, hey, give me an 8-ball of methamphetamine. I don't think there's a little bit of that, but not like it used to be.
Yeah.
We have entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Junction City Police Department. They've got a criminal interdiction gentleman who's great at human trafficking. He's got human trafficking training. He's also got criminal interdiction training. We let him work in our county with our guys to kind of train our guys up and make our guys better. We work with the Homeland Security Investigations Unit, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the KBI, the surrounding law enforcement agencies, the United States Postal Service. We've got our foot in the door everywhere. We may interdict something here in our county, like 300 pounds of marijuana, that may be delivered into Kansas City, Missouri, and we may follow that on and turn it over to them. And then that investigation may lead to cartel business and that type of thing. So to me, it's all about stemming the flow of drugs across the board, and it's about punching the cartels where it hurts.
Yeah.
And that's interdicting their flow of traffic, their flow of narcotics and drug and money.
What does it do you think about the cartel that really wants to continue to flood in? Is it money, power? Like, what do
I
you
think
think
it's
it
money.
is? Money.
I think it's all driven by money. And I think with money comes power
Yeah.
in Mexico. So I can't say that the law enforcement or the government down there is corrupt, but I think if you introduce so much money into something, eventually it's going to corrupt the system.
Yeah.
Money corrupts.
Yeah. How when you go to hire a law enforcement officer, what is it something that you look for, and what is something that you look forward to either hire them or not hire them?
Honesty is huge. Um, we go through a process. We've instituted a pretty strict hiring process where we don't just settle for the next guy on the block. We put them through testing. We put them through a rigorous background investigation. What I like about it is we took the good old boy system out of it. So I may be aware of the people that have applied, but they go through all of the testing and the interview process and the interview board before they come to me. And then once they're recommended to me, I will do an interview of the candidates. And ultimately I'll pick the candidate that I feel is best for the job, but it's 99, well, it's 100% so far been the person that has been recommended to me by that process. So I can honestly say we don't hire somebody who's a friend of a friend of a friend. We just don't do that anymore. And it has made the process cleaner, and I think we've gotten better candidates because of it.
Yeah. Kind of kept the gray area out versus,
Yes.
well, they're my friends, so this or that.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
Um, so for parents out there, what do you think that parents can do to try to be more aware of either the vapes or the, weed products that are in vape shops?
I don't know, because no matter how involved the parent is with the kid still is not going to be with that parent 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
They still have to go to school where they're in this environment totally separate from mom and dad. So I think all you can do is just be vigilant and try to do the best you can, but don't overreact. Uh, just be there, be supportive of them, and know that just because your kid screwed up, it doesn't mean they're a screw up. They just
Yeah.
had a brain fart and messed up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that oftentimes parents, they want to, they really want to just like dial that in, and sometimes it's out of either emotion or they go too far with it, and that can kind of push the kid the opposite direction versus they want to butt heads and they
yeah,
want to really dive
you
more
can't
into
judge
it.
the parent though. I could see the judge. I mean, I can see the parent's side of it. I mean, I have a different perspective. I'm able to be on the outside looking in. I'm not living the experience. But when you're a parent and you're living it, I can't imagine all the turmoil that you have to go through trying to get your kids through this society now.
Yeah.
But we turn out whole lot of good kids.
Yeah. What is a piece of information that you'd tell your 20-year-old self?
My 20-year-old self, just focus on what you want to do and make sure it's the right thing. And when you have choices that present themselves to you, always try to pick the right thing, not the popular thing.
Yeah.
Every single day of every minute of every day, people are presented with choices in their life that they're not even aware of. Like I might have chosen to take a different route here today, and I might have got hit by a freaking train. That one decision affected not only my life, but everybody who's associated with me. Every single day we make decisions that affect the rest of our life and we're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Just try to make the right decision at every turn, and I think you're going to be okay.
Yeah. There was a question. I remember. Oh. What's the biggest thing that you've learned about uh, law enforcement, being in law enforcement?
The biggest thing that I've learned about law enforcement
Yeah.
is that the majority of law enforcement are good core people. They truly are. I know in the past there's been a line drawn where, oh, this cop's dirty, so all the rest of the cops have to support him because there's that blue line. That's not it. The majority of the good cops, want the bad cop out of there just as much as society does, because it's just a cancer that infects us all.
Yeah.
So years ago, I had an instructor at the police academy, Maynard Brazil. He was huge. He was about 9 foot tall. He was a retired Kansas City, Missouri police detective, but he taught ethics. And he taught me that this is what I took from it. Law enforcement, attorneys, doctors are professions. They're not just jobs or careers. And what sets a profession apart from a job or a career is a profession is responsible for policing themselves. And how well you police yourself determines your ethics. That stayed with me through my entire career, and it's 100% spot on. We have to take care of our own and clean our own ranks. We have to get rid of the dirty cops whenever necessary.
Yeah.
So that's ethics to me.
What is it that you look for? Like if you have an officer, let's just say hypothetically you have an officer that you're kind of questioning whether or not he's, being set to the standard that you have, or if he's kind of going about his own path in his own way.
I've established a chain of command. So if there's an officer at that level, I would expect their sergeant to bring it to their supervisor's attention and address it there. And if it's not addressed, then push it on to the next chain, the next officer in the chain. That's how I would prefer it's done. Now, if it is something egregious, we'll open an investigation. If there's a conflict, we'll have another agency conduct the investigation for us. Because the whole goal is to get to the root of the problem, figure out what's going on, and then take action. That's how we do things at the sheriff's office. It's worked out really well for us.
What is like the day-to-day tasks that you have to complete as a sheriff?
Daily task is just management of the office. You manage the budget, you manage the personnel, you manage the policies. Every decision that's made filters up to you eventually, good, bad, or otherwise. Now, you may not have to take action, but if I've got a sergeant that's done something and that filters up to me, I have to decide how we have to address that. It's just mainly managing personnel. It's not labor intensive, but it's time and information intensive. So just dealing with the day-to-day operations of the sheriff's office, you come to work every day at 5 in the morning, and you don't know if you're going home at 5 in the evening, or if you're having to work late or whatever. It's a lot of work, but it's so rewarding. I love what I do. I used to think criminal investigations was the best job in the world because that's where my heart was, and I loved it. I loved helping people. But now I'm in a position where I think I can affect things more positively across the board for everybody, and I love that much better.
Yeah.
So
What are some of the steps that you took in order to work your way up to becoming sheriff?
I studied every chance I got. Like when I was a road officer, I read all the traffic laws. I read all the criminal laws. When I moved up into criminal investigations, I took all the training I could on interviewing children, interviewing adults, interrogating people, crime scene investigation. You have to overload yourself with information and figure out of all that information what you've taken, how can I use that information to better me as a criminal investigator? And then you just apply it. When I was a criminal investigator, you'd get called to a pretty significant scene. You get called out. You could actually feel the tension of the road deputies, the patrol officers, decrease the minute you got there. And the only way I can explain that is okay, we've done our job. Now we have to hand it off to him. Now all this pressure we just felt goes to him. We're relieved of our pressure because now he's taking care of it. And then that's the way I was with the prosecutor. I have questions. I go to the prosecutor. He guides me. But you could actually feel the tension lower when you got there. And that's one of the things I just thought was so cool, was that I'm at that point now where they trust my judgment that I'm going to be able to work through this. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's good responsibility.
Before someone goes into law enforcement, what are some of the things that, like stressors, like, as you were saying, working late at night, that can be kind of taxing on someone sometimes. What are some of the not as talked about things that people should know?
People go and they get criminal justice degrees and that type of thing, and that's good as far as understanding the criminal justice system. But the thing that I found that was most effective was psychology. I use psychology more than any of that other stuff my entire career. Just trying to know how somebody's going to react and try to get to the bottom of the situation. If you think about it, an interrogation is a very tricky thing because I'm trying to get the information, and the person I'm interviewing or interrogating, their whole goal is to not get caught and not go to prison. But yet they still tell me what they did. There's a psychology involved there. And I would recommend to anybody who's thinking about going into law enforcement, go into psychology majors. That's huge. If you go into psychology, though, you may find yourself, not wanting to be a law enforcement officer because the money's not there. Why not go into psychiatry, psychology, that type of thing?
Yeah.
So psychology is huge in law enforcement.
What do you see a different standard between law enforcement now and what it used to be when you first got in?
Yeah. Law enforcement isn't trusted as much now as it used to be. And law enforcement's done that to themselves, but the criminal justice system's done that to them. Televised trials. The justice system, in my mind, was always about truth, getting to the truth. At some point, the truth didn't matter anymore. Now it's about winning or losing. And that's both sides. The prosecutor wants to win, the defense attorney wants to win. It's not about finding out the truth. And I wished it was, but it's not.
Do you think that televised court cases are good or bad, or both?
I think it's good for the public to see what happens. I believe it's bad when you've got those attorneys that press the line. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but
Yeah.
that muddy the water. If it was about truly getting to the truth, then I think televised is the way to go.
Yeah. Do you think that oftentimes, especially with lawyers, do you think that maybe there should be a cap on pay, because sometimes it seems like maybe it's misconstrued, but the best, like the more the lawyer costs, the more likely they are to win. Do you think that that's often misconstrued, or
That's the old argument where the class of society, if you're a rich person, you get better law enforcement, you get better representation than you do if you're a poor person that's struggling. And I don't know how you remedy that. I think it's always going to be there. And I don't think anybody's ever going to resolve that.
yeah,
I don't know how you would fix that.
yeah, it's very sticky situation to try and figure out
Yeah.
if someone was to do that. Is there anything that you want to offer, any information or anything to anybody that's listening?
I just want to brag on the sheriff's office. I don't think the road patrol, the detention staff, and the office staff, people actually realize what they do and how they do it and how well they do it. Every one of those individuals cares about what they do and they care about their community. That's what's huge to me is I've got a great group of folks down there that really care about what they do, and they don't do it for the money. They have to bring in the money to be able to pay their bills and stay afloat, but they don't do it for the money. They do it because they truly care about what they do. The folks that work in the corrections on the detention side, they work 12-hour shifts. They're in there with the inmates for 12 hours. That's a lot of time to be back there and not free to leave. but it takes a very special kind of person to be a detention officer. And we've got them. They're very good at what they do. Our road patrol guys, they take their job very seriously. Uh, they really care about what they do. I know just yesterday I was able to recognize two of our deputies with life-saving commendations at the academy, and I didn't know this until last year, but they furnish them with tourniquets and that type of thing, and they teach them how to apply a tourniquet not only to other people but to themselves. And they told me that they grill it into them all the time down there how to use a tourniquet, that it's second nature to them. Yesterday I was able to honor Deputy Connor Hassenbank because last year he responded to a UTV accident where a 14-year-old girl had an injured leg. He identified the injury, took his tourniquet out within 2 minutes of rising on scene, and applied the tourniquet. Doctors contacted us later and said that saved that 14-year-old girl's life. I had an officer, I think he was a 47-year-old man, put his arm through a window. Deputy James Hager responded within 3 minutes of arriving on scene, put a tourniquet on his arm. I was contacted by the flight paramedic on LifeStar personally that said that tourniquet saved that man's life. He would have bled out before the ambulance would have gotten there. So those guys, and they do that thing without reacting. I talked to the mother of the 14-year-old, and she said what really stood out is he did his job and he didn't even think about what he was doing. It was just second nature to him. So kudos to Deputy Hager and Deputy Hassenbank. They did a marvelous job. And that's just an example of what our folks do every day. They come to work dedicated to doing what they're doing. Not one of them, I think, I talk to them all the time. They all look forward to coming to work. Nobody wakes up and rolls out of bed and thinking, oh my gosh, I got to go to work today. They all really want to come in and they want to do the right thing, and that's exceptional.
Yeah.
So if you see a corrections officer or a road deputy or any of the office staff, just give them a kudos. Just give them a little nod. That's all it takes.
Yeah. I feel like it's definitely needed, and I feel like oftentimes it's just that job is very kind of brushed off or just looked at as it's just a job, but you were saying it's a profession, something that have to be very self-analyzing about.
I never want to leave it.
Yeah.
So I'll do it as long as you guys let me. So
all right. Well, I thank you for.
I thought you said this was going to last 2 hours. We still got a ways to go.
I mean, we can continue to go.
I'm kidding.
Right.
If you need anything else in the future, let me know.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.